Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of my videos. Today I just wanted to show you a few matches from my recent online chess tournaments. This was a particular game. This particular game was played on the Slow Rapid competition on chess.com. That's being run by the English Chess Federation, so the federation that I play in. And this was a very interesting game actually. There was lots of complications, lots of fun gambity chess. I started to lose my way a little bit later in the position, but I was able to win the game in the end. So let's just show you how the game progressed. Bear in mind this is a 15-minute plus 10-second increment game. So not as long as I like to normally play, but it's still long enough to give you a little bit of a decent idea, a decent position. Not too many blunders, hopefully, but we'll see how it goes. So I was playing as white. I played e4. My opponent played e6. Played d4. d5 was played, and e5 going into the advanced variation. This is a position I quite like to play as white, as I like to go into some dangerous gambity lines as white here. So after the move c5, now hitting this pawn on d4, so this is a thematic plan in the advanced French. If you're playing as black, you want to get on with your counterplay, and playing c5 now attacks this d4 point, which is kind of the focal point that you want to be putting all your pieces on to attack this position. And after c3, so now defending this d4 pawn, he now re-attacks it again with the knight on c6, and I now defend it with my own knight. He played the move bishop to d7. This is actually quite an important move, as if he continues straight away with queen to b6, here I'm actually doing quite fine after this move, as there are some scary gambity stuff here. So you can give up here. He has to play the move bishop to d7. If he captures and continues to capture, this is in fact a losing position for white, as now after knight captures, queen comes here, bishop here comes with a check, and you'll notice that the queen is now going to be lost. So that's why you've got to, in these sort of positions, you've got to at some point play this bishop to d7 move. It stops those threats from occurring. So going back, play bishop to d7, bishop to d3, and it looks as though I'm going to lose this pawn now, as I've no longer got that potential threat here because the bishop is now on d7. But the point is, I've got these nice gambity lines that gives me a lot of play. So I play, so he plays queen to b6, now hitting the pawn. I now castle. He captured, I captured back, and now here my opponent captured with the knight. And I've got two ways of proceeding in this position. The first and more popular way to play is actually capturing this knight first. The point being is, after queen takes, I can play the move knight to c3, and I actually get quite a lot of play for the loss of a pawn. This is actually called the Milner-barry gambit, and it's a very dangerous gambit system that black needs to be aware of if he's playing the against the French exchange. The point being is that black really probably shouldn't take that second pawn, as he's going to get himself into a lot of trouble early on. In actual fact, the strongest move here, and a move that I really don't like facing when I play this on over classical games, is the move a6. And this a6 move is really powerful, as it does a couple things. Firstly, it allows a potential escape square for the queen to come back to a7. So getting out of the position, you're up a pawn, you're doing fine, but also it stops this knight from potentially jumping into this dangerous b5 square, where it can create some threats on c7. Obviously the bishop does defend it, but if they ever capture, we capture back, and then this king is then trapped in the center. So it allows us a lot of play for white. So that a6 move, really nice idea, and it's just something I don't particularly enjoy playing against when I'm playing the Milner-barry attack. So going back then, what I like to play instead is actually knight b to d2, so now defending this knight. The point being, after he captures, which makes sense, you have a pawn, you want to try and exchange all the pieces off. I can capture back with a knight. But this actually allows me some more play here, as I can now potentially jump into g5 and start hitting these sensitive squares for black on the king side. So bishop came to c5, logical move, getting the bishop developed, but also now readying the potential knights to e7 followed by castles. The problem with this bishop to c5 move is it allows me to play a really dangerous gambit here now, so I can actually play the move b4, and this actually offers another pawn, and he can capture here with the bishop, but this gives me a bit too much play, as now I can play rook to b1, hitting the bishop, and black's going to get really tied up over on the queen side trying to defend everything. I had a look through some of the lines. There's already some devastating threats now for white in this position. He'll start jumping over to the king side, and it's actually really difficult to defend this position, really hold this position at all. So it's something he doesn't really particularly want to play, so instead he played queen takes on b4, which probably offers him the best play. But this still allows me to get a tempo on the queen, and I'm going to be capturing this pawn on b7. So in this position my opponent played queen to a5 here, but I think more interestingly, what would have been interesting is the move queen to a4 here. And actually this offers up, well, it offers a trade here. I can take if I want to. I think actually I would prefer, in keeping with the gambit spirit, playing maybe queen to e2, which defends this a pawn but keeps the pieces on the board. But I can actually play queen takes on a4 if I want to. After bishop takes, rook takes. I'm down a pawn here, but in actual fact this is actually not a bad position to play as white. I've got a lot of good activity. Once I get my bishop developed on c1, I can shift over my rook over to the b file and control this lovely open file that I have here. And this is quite difficult to defend against for black, but certainly this is definitely playable for black, though he's up in this position I think there's a couple pawns, isn't it? No, just a pawn, but he's got a lovely position. He's got the bishop pair still. I think he should do absolutely fine. So going back then, what actually happened is my opponent played queen to a5, and this led into a really interesting complication that I actually missed in the game, and I wish I did play it. So I fought for quite a long time here, and in the end I opted to play knight to g5, so now just starting the attack on the king side here, and doing all kinds of damage along the black side. But in actual fact, what I was worried about here was after my rook coming to b7, which looks like I win a pawn, I would love to ideally play this rook to c7 if the bishop came to c6. But the problem is this queen defends this square on c7, so I can't really do those sort of moves. So after bishop to c6, it looks as though I'd have to retreat my rook. I've lost a bit of tempo in this position. In actual fact, what I totally missed was rook takes on f7, a really powerful move, as now, after the king captures, I've got a lot of potential with my pieces that are going to come jumping into the king side and deliver some nasty attacks on the king. So I can jump in with a knight g5. If, let's say, the king came to e7, I can actually come into g4, and this is already looking really dangerous now for black. He could come back with his bishop to d7 to hold here. I can now jump into h7, and well, I'm already generating some problems here for black. I'm already threatening now this check, which would come with this fork. He could capture here with the rook as well, but again this just allows me to recapture the rook. In actual fact here I think I am now, well, I'm still down a piece, but I'm threatening just to still come here and take off the knight for free. So certainly a position that black wouldn't have wanted to go into. Another line that was also really interesting is what happens after king to e8. Again here I can threaten mate. Oops, I can still threaten mate with queen to f3. Not really mate, because the king can run along here, but I can come along over and take the rook off. So maybe queen to c7 to sort of block that threat, but now I can got a second threat which is taking here on e6, and you notice here I'm attacking the queen, but I'm also attacking this knight. They could still come to f7, but afterwards I can capture everything off. I'm actually still down a pawn in this position, but I've got certainly a lot of activity here for that loss of the pawn. You'll see I'm already threatening ideas such as e6, maybe pushing forward with f4, and start delivering some mating potential. So I'll just show you one fun variation. If knight to e7, I can play e6, and it's actually quite difficult for black to proceed here. If he goes back, his rooks are no longer going to be communicating. It's going to be very difficult for them to develop in this position. And the other option is coming forward, but this actually just loses on the spot, as basically this king is just going to have to either give up a piece or get checkmated, and you'll just see why the potential of my pieces are so strong here. I can play bishop to b2, now hitting the king. The problem with this king now is he can't go backwards anymore because this pawn was blocking. It's created a blockade, so he actually has to come forward. The only move which is forced is now king to g5. You could also, the actual computer recommends playing this, which just shows that black is trying to stall something here. But if he comes to let's say g5, f4 can come in. If king to h5, in this position I can play rook to f3, and already this is looking really bad for black here. I'll just continue with what the computer recommends here. So rook a to b8, just so you can see some of the threats. I can play bishop to e5. After bishop to b5, I can come in with the check now. King to g4, bishop to c2. So coming round to start nearly delivering a mate here. He would actually have to play, just to sort of stop this threat, play bishop to e2, after which I can come to g3, king to h4. I can now, this is actually now mating for white here, after a move like knight to d3, really powerful move. So getting ready to come round and start delivering this sort of checkmate. You can delay it for a few moves, but in actual fact this is still winning here for myself. The threat here after rook to c8 is coming to e3, and then followed up with just simply rook to h3. So there's not anything that black can do in this position. He would have to maybe give up a rook here, but even this does not slow down the mating threat here. So very, very dangerous. So it's actually kind of a way that the pawn kind of has to go forward in this position, because it would at least stop the rook from coming to f3, because the bishop controls this square. So here this does need to be played, which looks weird, but now this is still pretty bad for black. f4, h5. There's just too much here for black to try and defend here. f5 can be played. My bishops are going to come along here. They're going to deliver a very, very nasty mate. So certainly an interesting position that I could have played. Obviously I didn't calculate that far ahead, but it's certainly, the positions that I could have reached would have been very promising for white, had I had sacrificed that rook on f7. So yeah, it's quite a long detour, that variation, but it's certainly very, very interesting to say the least. So in any case, what happened in the actual game? So queen came here. Queen came to a5. I now played knight to g5. h6 was played, which was actually a mistake, as it now allows me to play queen to h5, which is now threatening here. He could capture this, but he loses the rook, so that's no good for him. But a very interesting move here, I didn't see it coming, was actually castling long, which sort of saves him for a little bit. I captured here on f7. Bishop came back to e8. I play my queen to g6, so just threatening this now. He took, I took. Queen came back. I took the pawn with a check, and I got myself into a nice position, but I ended up losing it a little bit. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit because there's not a whole lot to see in this position. I sort of start falling behind a little bit here. Allowed him to come back into the game, but I wanted to stop at this point in the game where here I had a really devastating threat that I totally missed in this position. I think we were both getting quite low on time. I think I was down to just 3 minutes left in this position. So here, after queen to d7, I could have played now queen takes on d7. The point being, after, let's say, the rook captures back, I now had the move rook takes on c5. You notice here that this pawn cannot capture back, as that would be check. So that was the first way I could have won the position straight away. The other move that ended up happening, so what ended up happening was we played on a little bit longer. I had this weird looking position, but here I had a really devastating move now, which I did get in the game thankfully. And here I played captures here, and we had the same idea just a little bit later, and I was able to then convert the game quite easily after this capture. Okay, these pawns look dangerous, but I'm able to hold the position. I think what would have been interesting is if maybe rook to c7. This might have been an interesting continuation to play, as he's now got behind one of the pawns. But I think here white just needs to be patient. He's still going to win this. He just needs to get his king over to the pawns. And bear in mind as well, black can't throw too many things to help these pawns, as I've got my own pass pawn here that I'll be looking to maybe push in the future. So I'll just show you an example continuation. Let's say e7 I can take here, which is no good. So let's say we go here, and that this loses even more. So I can actually now play bishop here, and I can now play this way, and you'll see here my pawn is going to get through now. So that was certainly something that could have happened. But the game didn't last much longer after this. He pushed one of the pawns. I now played my king to g1. c3 happened, which certainly confused me, as now I can now play rook to c8. He's got no way of stopping this pawn. If he does play this, I'm fine with this, as after I capture, he captures back. I can now push forward with e7. Okay, he can move his pawn, but now I come with the queen. After the queen comes to c8. This looks dangerous, but in actual fact my king escapes, and he actually hasn't got any checks here that he can play. So after a move, let's say, queen to c5, I can start coming in with potential mating nets here now. So yeah, it was certainly an interesting position that we reached here. But I think after this, I think did he resign in this position? I can't remember now. I think he resigned after I played this, because he played, let's see, I think he played d4 here and moved my rook to f2. He then played, yeah, this was the mistake. So he just played d3, thinking he can just push on through, but I just captured this pawn and he resigned here. I think he was low on time in this position, so I wouldn't blame him for blundering this. So yeah, another quite interesting game. I've got another 3 to show you and hopefully go through and analyse with you. Take care.